Greetings all. I am so happy to welcome you. I must say I take ridiculous pleasure from watching where people are joining us from. It gives me such a thrill. I'm Valerie Fletcher. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and it is my distinct pleasure to host our international webcasts. I'm joined by PJ Moynihan, our producer, and our co-producer, Remy Allegro. I am really thrilled this morning to be able to share with you somebody that I met in November of 2024 in Oslo at an international conference. And I'm a lucky duck that gets to be out there in the world, meeting interesting people and identifying emerging leaders. And Iris really knocked me out. And I thought, what a talent, what potential this woman has. And I am so lucky that now she is here in Boston because she is doing a Fulbright Fellowship for this academic year. And she is attached to the MIT Department of Urban Studies and Planning and to us. So we get to spend a lot of time with Iris. Today she is in New Orleans. She is making the maximum use of her time in the United States. So she is actually remote and joining us from there. We are going to hear a story that is commonplace across the world, which is her personal experience with going from being an architect. Probably, she hasn't told me this, but she might have thought she knew everything when she finished architecture school. But she has had a total conversion experience by a bit of serendipity she'll tell us about. But part of what is so special about Iris's story is that she's talking about difficult contexts. And however passionate people might be, much of the stories that need to be told and unearthed and pursued are making this happen in difficult contexts. That is kind of the norm in the world. So we will be hearing about Romania here. And before I let you go, I want to just note that we also want to do a little shameless promotion of an event that'll be coming up in November of this year, but the deadline for proposals to participate is April 8th. So not much time at all on that. That's next week. But this is UD 26 that will be held in Galway, Ireland. We have a number of Irish colleagues who are joining us today. I am absolutely thrilled to be a participant in this event and finding that everybody wants to go to Galway. It's very, very appealing. The information about how to connect to this opportunity and how to get the information about proposing either as a researcher or as a practitioner are on our website. We'll send them off to everybody when this is over, if we can use everybody's contact information. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Iris Popescu. Iris, the floor is yours, my friend.
Hello, I'm Iris Popescu, and thank you, Valerie, for this wonderful presentation. And your words mean a lot to me, and you know this already. And thank you for the experience that I'm having at the IHCD. Thank you to both you and the whole team, because it's making this whole Fulbright amazing for me. I will start sharing my presentation, so that wouldn't keep you further. So hello, everybody. I'm Iris Popescu. I'm an architect, and for the past decade, I've been specializing in inclusive design and accessibility. And first of all, I want to thank everyone who decided to be here and listen to this story. So I will start with what you can expect from this presentation. I will get you through my journey alongside AMAIS, the nonprofit that I started in 2015. I will offer you a grounded look at advancing inclusive design in Romania, also reflections on our project's impact, but also failures and lessons that we learned. How inclusion depends on more than just design. We also need institutions, education, resources, trust, and advocacy. Something that's very close to me and something very important, why the architect's role today extends further from creating spaces to enabling systems of change, and what difficult contexts can teach us about building more inclusive futures. Well, first of all, why should this story matter to you? Because I have to mention that this is not in no way a comparison of hardships between countries. When I say a difficult context, it's because I think Romania offers an interesting case when it comes to accessibility. Because Romania is a country with institutions, laws, resources, and also formal commitments to accessibility, yet the system meant to support this inclusion often fails in practice. So I've asked myself this question, like what happens when you try to build inclusive spaces in this gap between what exists on paper and what really works in reality? I'll first start with offering information about location, because maybe Romania is not a country that's familiar to everybody and its location on Earth. In this image I'm showing, on the right side of the globe, there's a pin where Boston is and the location of the Institute for Human-Centered Design. And on the other side of the image, you can see a pin for where Romania is. Coming closer, Romania, I'm showing now a print screen from Google Maps with Europe. Unfortunately, because of the scale of the image, some of the countries are not visible, those close to Greece, between Greece and Serbia. So sorry for that in case somebody is here listening. So Romania is a country in Eastern Europe, and I've also pinned here where Bucharest is, because this is where my story started, in Bucharest, which is the capital of Romania, a city in the southeastern part of Romania. Coming back to Bucharest, my story started in Vatra Luminoasă, which is a neighborhood that is very well connected to the history of people with disabilities in Romania, of the community of people with visual disabilities in Romania. And why do I say this? Because this neighborhood is actually the first neighborhood in Europe that got its name from the architectural program it was hosting. And it was called the Asylum for the Blind, and it was started by the monarchy at the beginning of the 20th century in this neighborhood. And afterwards, the whole neighborhood developed, and you will see now in the next photo, in the next print screen, it's filled with housing, individual housing, collective housing. It's a very peaceful neighborhood. So my story started in Vatra Luminoasă in one of the parks, the national park. This was in 2013, while I was taking a walk through that park. This is when I had my moment of obligation, or more simply put, my aha moment. I was in my last year of architecture school. I am a millennial, and I was trying to find a topic for my diploma that will also have a social impact. That was very important to me. And I was taking a break from trying to find this topic, taking a walk through that park that I mentioned. And this was the moment when I saw a couple of blind people with their baby in a stroller, because this is only in my memories. I've used a ChatGPT generated image showing a couple with two white canes and a baby stroller. And this was the moment when I realized that in the 6 years of architecture school, we did not discuss about how you would design without taking sight into consideration, or how you would design for somebody who is blind. And this is something I came across in other architectural schools around the world also. The fact that the design studio is very focused on the visual aspects, and it's not very well connected to the relationship to other senses. And when it came to discussing about accessibility, we were actually usually talking about retrofitting, and it was a ramp at the end of the project. A ramp that that was very unpleasant for all of us, because we had this perception that this ramp coming at the end was ruining our projects. So that was the attitude towards accessibility. And we never discussed about empathy or human diversity, or how our needs change throughout our lives. So after this moment, it was fairly easy for me to get out of my social bubble and see how powerful social segregation really was between people with permanent disabilities and people temporarily without disabilities in my country. And part of it is directly related to the built environment, because the built environment is a powerful instrument, as you all here know, that can limit your abilities, even if you do not have a certificate that says that you have a permanent disabilities. So I felt that it was my direct responsibility as an architect to get involved and see how I can change, how I can generate at least a part of the change of this problem. So this led me to founding AMAIS. AMAIS is a nonprofit organization that I started in 2015. And my really simple early hypothesis was, okay, I'm an architect, I will do participatory design, so that will lead me to good public spaces. Yes, pretty naive, you would say. Well, the plan was to start a nonprofit, promote inclusive design, and this will lead me to improving public spaces. I'm now showing an image that a photo that I had the opportunity to take during the 1st of December in 2021. It's the 1st of December is our National Day. And I caught a moment where there was a meeting of people with diverse disabilities who were celebrating the National Day. So it's an image that shows people with diverse types of disabilities, some in wheelchairs, some using walkers, sorry, having also the Romanian flag with them. I'm showing this image because I want to take you now a bit through the context. Romania on paper versus reality. Our country has legislation related to accessibility. It also has national disability strategies. We have also ratified the CRPD. We have resources because we have EU structural funding, and we also have EU directives that make us sometimes apply other laws that maybe were not of interest for politicians. So theoretically, we should already be doing very well, you might say. But unfortunately, in reality, accessibility is still extremely poor. And I will take you through some examples of this is just a selection because I have a really huge archive of images. These are just a few examples so you would understand the obstacles that are present in the context of the built environment in Romania. And some of them might be familiar to your settings or your cultural context. The first one is an image of a series of infinite ramps with slopes so steep that sometimes even athletes without disabilities would struggle to climb them. This is from a small town in Sovata, in Romania. Then I also have an image of a parent who chooses to use the stairs with the baby stroller rather than the ramp that's right next to him, right next to them, because the ramp is too steep and too dangerous. And also this example, which is from Timișoara. Timișoara is a really big city from Romania, and this city was also the European Cultural Capital in 2024. This is an image taken in the main square of Timișoara, Victory Square, where there is a pedestrian crossing that's underneath the square. And in the image, you may see stairs, but there is also an elevator for people with disabilities or maybe people who use assistive devices. And you might think, oh, great, there is this pedestrian crossing with stairs, so they've mounted an elevator. Well, we have that elevator, but you cannot actually use it. If we look closer, on the upper side, the elevator door opens in a plant holder, and on the lower side, the door opens in another door of the bathroom for people with disabilities. So I actually caught this image also on the 1st of December in Timișoara, but in 2024, when somebody who was using a wheelchair had to be helped by two other people to get the wheelchair first downstairs, and then also they helped the person to be able to get downstairs there, where, of course, there was no access to the accessible bathroom. And then you even have examples like this, where you have Braille messages carefully protected behind the glass window. And you might understand the irony there, given that Braille is a tactile alphabet. So we have these examples, and I must say that there is a big confusion. They are the result of a big confusion in society related to terms, what accessibility is, what accessibility retrofitting is versus inclusive design, universal for all, empathic, and so on. During my PhD, I've also done a survey with built environment professionals, and 53% of the respondents revealed the confusion between accessibility retrofitting and inclusive design. And this was revealed by the fact that they defined it in the same way or very similar ways. And even if you look at public data, official data from the ministries, you may see that only 10% of public institutions offer unrestricted access to certain categories of people with disabilities. So I would say that in reality, in Romania, around 1 million people live with permanent disabilities, and most of them do not have real access to education, to decent jobs, or to social life. So why should this matter to the Romanian society and not just to our society? I'm showing an image now of a big group of people who did not know each other trying to help a mother get a baby stroller on a bus in Bucharest. This is from 2023. And this should matter because disability, as probably many people know here, disability is not just permanent. It's also temporary, it's also context-based. And Romania, because of this lack of involvement in improving the accessibility of built environment, actually creates disabilities where there is no certificate stating that somebody has a permanent disability. And because this is happening, and we are only counting people who have these certificates, Romania actually uses inaccurate data in its strategy because it's only looking at the people who have the certificates, and it doesn't have the picture of how big the problem really is and how many people are affected. And because of these two reasons, these also create a division in society because there are a lot of resources and there are a lot of that need to be shared. And there's a lot of tension between different categories, social categories. And I think it's important to specify that I'm not trying to show how far behind Romania is. This is not the goal of my presentation. I think that the level where my country is a decent evolution given its history and everything that happened after the communist period. I think the evolution is at an okay rate. But what I would like to say is that I am aware that, and I would like even people from Romania who are listening to be aware of this, that this story is part of a bigger systemic problem. I've also put a slide, this is just one slide with some examples from Berlin, Germany, where bus stops intersect with cyclist lane, then from Stockholm, Sweden, where ramps are so steep that people use them as slopes. Also some examples from Cambridge and Boston, where parents choose to pick up the stroller and go up the stairs rather than use the secondary accessible entrance, which is far away and more inconvenient to use and hidden somewhere. And also from the Venice Biennale, where parents with baby strollers were invited through the emergency exit in the Netherlands pavilion in 2021, even though, ironically, the exhibition was about mothers in public spaces. So our story is part of a bigger international problem. And there still are tensions between activists for the rights of people with disabilities and built environment professionals. Some of these professionals that are involved in the decision process of improving the built environment are public administration, engineers, developers, architects, urban planners, activists, and so on. So my firm belief is that in order to improve the built environment, we first need to change mentalities on what accessibility means, what disability means as a concept. But in order to do that, these professionals need a place to practice their ability to actively listen, to empathize, and discover human diversity. And I'm saying they need these places because I've noticed that once people uncover the stories of exclusion, it's like learning a new language, because this has happened to me as well. And once you know this language, it reveals discriminatory message all around, especially in public spaces. So this brought me to my realization that I was trying to build inclusive spaces in a system that had no foundation to support them. And inclusive design doesn't just need a good architect. It needs public institutions that understand and support it, and in some cases, even enforce it. It needs professionals that are trained to implement it. It needs communities that trust you enough to get involved and shape it. It needs knowledge available in the right languages, because that can also be an issue. It needs financial resources allocated with accountability, because accessibility is not always about solutions that do not cost you. You need to allocate a budget because that shows that you really believe in this change. And you also need political will that outlasts election cycles. And that is very important because you need a continuation in this process. So what is really holding the system in place in Romania? Well, first of all, the persistent biases and a limited understanding of what disability really is, seeing it from the medical model most of the times. Then also a lack of resources and a structural support. And through a structural support, I'm also referring to having a real network of professionals from different domains that have a focus on accessibility and would be able to build this foundation. So what my work and the work of the organization that I started focuses on is enabling behavioral change, increasing visibility and independence for people with permanent disabilities, especially in public spaces, and being more visible and present in social activities, and providing practical real-world examples that model inclusive practices. So I would say that our approach is related to this idea of changing the way society views and interacts with disability, and I mean one's own disability or that of others. thus contributing to a world where disability is recognized as part of human diversity and accessibility and inclusion become regular parts of the design process. In order to do that, I've been working for the past decade on multiple fronts of action. You have practice, community trust, resources, academia, built environment professionals, public administration, and also international outreach. And I will go through each of them with some examples that I selected so you would understand what we did, or what I did, and the lessons that we got out of this. So I will start with practice, because I think if I would have to prioritize them, on the two most important are for sure practice and community's trust, which is the second one here. So for this, I selected one of the most complex projects that I've worked on. It's a public space design project. I have, again, a print screen from Google Maps where I've just selected Romania with a small dot on the right side, a small yellow dot, that it's supposed to signal Mahmudia, which is a small town on the Danube. It's also at the most eastern limit of the Danube Delta. And you might say it's close to the eastern limit of Europe, of the European Union as well. If you look closer, it's a small town, 2,000, close to 2,000 people on the Danube River, as I told you. So what happened here is that the public administration asked the main designer, which was Wolfhouse Productions, and I and some part of my team worked with them on the project. They asked us to design some hopefully iconic and amazing infrastructure for tourists. You have in the image, it's an image showing on the one side the Danube and on the other side how the shore looked like before the intervention. It's a pretty chaotic. There are some boats, a lot of cars parked. So there was not much of a public space there before. So they asked us for this iconic tourist infrastructure, but we followed an inclusive approach and worked with the community. And the resulting design is some quirky and inclusive infrastructure for community building that can also be used for tourism. When it comes, I focus more on the practice side, on the inclusive approach, because I think this is what's more relevant for this discussion. So the inclusive approach of this project was related, first of all, to having a pluridisciplinary team. We engaged experts from multiple fields for complementary knowledge and perspectives. We have had, of course, a strong base of norms and standards, established a clear and reliable base to start a project. And something that was very important, we have organized and facilitated empathy exercises. And these were done with our team, first of all, because we needed to be aligned on how we see accessibility, how we see disability. There were a lot of things that we needed to go through. And they were also done with the client and the builder, which are two important stakeholders in this project. When it comes to stakeholder engagement, we included diverse groups from the community, like citizens, fishermen, small business owners. They were all of diverse ages, diverse abilities, genders, and so on. Tourists, NGOs, and as I said, people of diverse ages, genders, abilities, and disabilities. And these were involved throughout all phases of the project. This project started in 2018 and it ended in 2024. It started with the feasibility study and then went on to the design and build phase. And we also have in-use analysis. We are evaluating the real-world impact on the community in order to inform future improvements, and I will get into that some slides later. This is a top image of the Danube shore, the Danube Mahmudia project. So if we would look at the results, we have combined them in 4 categories. One is topography of experiences, where people define the space through usage scenarios, context for interaction, and standard versus custom, and wayfinding, playfinding, and more. And I will explain why I'm calling it playfinding. When it comes to the topography of experiences and the results related to this, this is very much concentrated on the idea of, instead of imposing rigid designs, we preserved the natural features and created flexible frameworks for use. And this aerial image on the right actually shows the mineral park with diverse types of access options to the natural rocky features. This is what I'm saying related to the freedom in use, offering multiple ways of accessing and also interacting with that area. or the communal garden, which is the top left photo, where we intervened minimally with stabilizing sandpaths, information panels, and a deck for gathering. The design does not dictate use, it allows diverse scenarios to emerge. When it comes to context of interaction, these are again very much related to this freedom of use, which was very central, and in general, it's central to all the projects that I'm working on. Spaces where the limits between who is local and who is a tourist are no longer clear, where differences become less visible because of the freedom in use that supports finding personalized ways of enjoying the facilities. The plaza near the observation tower is a key interaction node. There is a playground with fluid boundaries between play and rest. There is also one of my favorite, for me, it's a play equipment, even though it's not officially named the play equipment. It's a level fountain, one of the most inclusive play elements because it engages multiple senses at the same time. Of course, I do not believe that 100% inclusive exists in architecture at the moment. So even this feature has its limits. For instance, people who use electrical wheelchairs which are not water resistant, or even people who are allergic to water in some cases, to the elements in water. So the playground combines standard equipment with landscape elements inspired by local geography, and it is not a rigid playground. It allows children to invent their own play scenarios. When it comes to standard versus custom, of course, the waterfront includes essential accessible infrastructure like drinking fountains, toilets, public toilets, seating, bike racks, but it also includes custom solutions created through a participatory process. Instead of classic tactile pavement, we created guidance through continuous surfaces and material rhythms. And these were solutions that came out of the focus groups and all the interviews and tests done. Obstacles are marked with river stone integrated into the pavement. One of my favorite custom elements is actually the sand table that can be seen in the bottom right photo, which is connecting children of different ages, heights, or who use assistive devices like a wheelchair with those playing in the sandpit. And you can sit at it, you can lie under it, you can hide, you can lie on it or you can hide under it, and it becomes play, furniture, and sculpture at the same time. Our wayfinding system is called playfinding because it combines functionality with play. Maps include Latin characters, of course, Braille icons, the basic things that you need to have on wayfinding systems. The 3D bronze models show Mahmudia as a part of the broader European Danube network. And we also have a poem about Mahmudia written only in Braille, compensating for the subjectivity of a viewpoint with the subjectivity of poetry. The system invites exploration and learning about flora and fauna, and it was actually a really great experience for us to develop the system of playfinding, and we are trying to use this concept in other projects as well. I think it's important, besides the good parts of the projects, to also make the challenges more visible, because it's important to know how you went through them or how they affected the project. First of all, as I said, the project started in 2018, so it was before the pandemic. And then the Mahmudia Public Administration got its funds, the European funds, in 2021. So you might imagine that there was a really big increase in prices, and the budget was done before the pandemic era, and you are not allowed to modify it. So we had to redesign and cut a lot of things. This is where the empathy exercises really came in hand, and they were crucial because the first thing that the builder and the client wanted to cut were things related to accessibility. So it was very important for us to have ways to convince them that those cannot be cut out of the projects and we need to redesign other elements. So as I'm saying, there was a low priority for accessibility features, and this was a big challenge. And then another really big challenge was the fact that there is no local production expertise for custom works. We had to design and import the wayfinding system from Germany, but that was very nice because we worked with Textile Studio and it was a very nice experience. But again, it would have been easier and probably the costs would have been lower if we would have been able to work with somebody who is local. This is also an image from one of the viewpoints where it's an image from the e-news analysis. We have an yearly visit with people with diverse types of disabilities. And this one shows somebody in a wheelchair, in an electrical wheelchair, with another person that has a white cane, staying on the viewpoint. When it comes to impact assessment, because this is a really important part of the project, we have 5 years of e-news analysis. This is something that, and I will talk about this later as well, this is something that we chose to do on our own budget and time because we felt that it's something that's really important when it comes to an inclusive approach to understand how the project has impacted the community, what's going on afterwards. It's very difficult to cover all the needs, even however hard you try in the whole inclusive process of designing and implementing the project. So it's important to also understand afterwards what happens with it, because this is how you continuously learn from diverse users. But all in all, even though the assessment started in 2024, so we are in our second year of analysis, we don't have final results for it yet. The report is not out of the conclusions we have. The conclusions are not out yet. But what we've noticed is that the project has had an impact on community. It became a good practice example, and especially because of the inclusive process. It got local awards, design awards for public space design. And this year we also received the IAUD gold medal for public space design. So it has become a good practice example for Eastern Europe. This is a very nice image from last year's site visit, was showing the diverse people that came with us. We were all playing on the playground in Mahmudia. So which are the lessons from practice that we had? The accessibility is still often understood too narrowly, mainly as ramps and tactile paving, and it's usually not a priority, unfortunately. Pilot projects and public space design can help show what richer forms of inclusion can look like, and this can shift mentalities more effectively than theory alone. Something it's a very big minus, the fact that we have a lot of European funds and public administration access them and invest in public space, but then they have a big challenge because they do not have local capacity and resources for long-term maintenance. This is something that came out of the report in these 2 years, and I'm sure it will be a big conclusion in the final report. Then also the participatory processes are essential, but often difficult to budget properly. That is why empathy exercise with clients are important, as I said earlier, for reducing biases before design starts. And impact assessment is critical, yet is rarely funded adequately. So this is why, as I said, we had to do it on our own resources. When it comes to gaining community's trust, I think this is one of the main priorities we have had. And that is why it was so important to have projects from the beginning, from 2015, projects with events that offer socializing, but also empower people with disabilities. One of our programs is an independent life skills school for people with visual disabilities and associated disabilities, where we teach orientation and mobility, while also training mobility trainers around the country, because we're trying to build a network of people that can offer this support. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Romania, there is no official program that offers people support if they lose their sight after 18 years old. And this happens a lot in their 60s or in their 70s, and there is no clear program that might offer you this support. So this is why we are trying to increase our impact by building this network. We have also developed an app that connects people with disabilities with guides that can take them around the city, around inaccessible cities. And through this app, besides serving basic needs that people might have to go in certain places, this app also helps us support people with disabilities to become more visible and mobile, especially in big public events. Because this is a way to also make accessibility issues more visible. Seeing directly these challenges that people face can work on these empathy exercises that we've talked earlier. And also events that are more fun, like on diverse topics, even music workshops that bring together people with and without disabilities of diverse ages. This is an example from a music workshop with children with and without disabilities. And even our biggest event, which is an inclusive disco, we do this yearly. This is more informal and more fun. It's more related to that and only that, most of all, because we have a lot of roundtables, a lot of conferences, but we thought that we also need to have an inclusive disco. And some people might actually say that this is the coolest party in Bucharest. So the lessons from the community trust are related to the fact that communities which are labeled as vulnerable may distrust institutions because exclusion has been repeated over time. You've seen the examples that I've shown earlier. And trust cannot be assumed. It must be built through direct, respectful, and continuous collaboration. This is why we are doing all these events that on the one side empower people with disabilities, but they also support them to become more visible. Participatory design is not just a method for gathering input, but a way of sharing power. This is very important. Working directly with diverse communities leads to more grounded and relevant solutions. And something that's very important to us is to practice what you preach. Even for us, when we became an inclusive team of people with and without disabilities, this strengthened and enriched our approach, and it continuously makes things better and better. And inclusion is stronger when people help shape the process, not only the outcome, because I've seen a lot of focus on the results, on what we need to have, and less on which is the process that you go through to get to that result. Besides practice and showing best practice models and gaining community trust, you also need resources. We had to publish books. I also had to publish books, and also some of the guides made with my team that go hand in hand with the practice and empowering people with knowledge related to inclusive design. I have published one book on inclusive design, which is more of a manifesto that is supposed to remind us of the responsibility we have towards community rather than offer direct solutions. It's a book that takes you through a lot of empathy exercises, kind of like an inclusive design guide based on empathy exercises, not solutions. And also my PhD, that it's more focused, and it's for people who have a particular interest in inclusive design. The guide is for people who are just starting to be interested in, but also free guides, some for public administration that focus on compliance, but also collaborations with big institutions like the World Bank or British Council to do, again, free resources for people. Moreover, we have also published in international publications like the one published by Building Diversity in Denmark, Copenhagen. The book is called But Who Are We Building For? It's the second edition from Who is the Architect? So the lessons from resources is the fact that they are related to the lack of practical guidance in the local language, limits understanding and application. That is why it was very important for us to publish books in Romanian. These books, guidelines, and every accessible resources that you put out there help bridge this gap. Having materials in your own language significantly increases accessibility and credibility. And even when not fully accessible, like using the book format, the published physical book format, this can actually strengthen trust and legitimacy. It gives more credibility to also have physical books. So there's also a minus in this because sometimes too much information can be overwhelming, and it is important to introduce this knowledge gradually and try to find a balance. One other really important lesson was related to funding for architectural publication, which is very limited and difficult to secure. That's why we have found a way to do this by linking publications to broader social projects that can help unlock resources and support. When it comes to academia, this is an image showing the group of students and mentors with and without disabilities from a project that we had last year. It was called the Grassroots Design Workshop. And it was very important to also get involved into academia. It's certainly a must because you need to make sure that the educational system also supports the change you want to make. Thus, we have been organizing empathy workshops in universities, especially in the University of Architecture. But I also started to teach inclusive architecture, an inclusive architectural course alongside Oana Mihăescu. And last year, as I mentioned earlier, this design studio, we tried to also apply Ray Lifsh's methodology and combine theory from the inclusive architecture course with practice in our community center. And this was a project where 25 students, they were from architecture school, urban planning, landscape design, and also special psychopedagogy, worked in teams with 10 mentors with diverse types of disabilities to try to understand, first of all, the context of our community center and the relationship to the people who come there, and then design solutions going through an inclusive process along the way. This is an image from the final critique on the project. There are some students who are using the models that they've created to explain to the mentors with visual disabilities the proposals they have had. So the lessons from academia are related to architecture schools that still frame accessibility and inclusion as special cases rather than regular parts of design. Courses, guest lecturers with diverse people of diverse ages, genders, abilities, and student workshops help introduce these topics early in professional formation. Practical activities should be connected to university credits. This was something that is really important because we've noticed that students have a lot to do already. So they don't have enough time to give you after the university. So if you can connect it to university credits, that's the ideal scenario because it also motivates them to participate. Of course, ideally, inclusive design should be embedded across design education rather than in an isolated separate course. But in practice, a separate course can sometimes be a necessary compromise that I had to accept to build a critical mass of future professionals. This critical mass can later help push for inclusion to be integrated into design school studios. I don't have a proof of that. I'm hoping for that. I'm still measuring. And hopefully in 10 years, you will hear me say that change has been made. This change in academia that requires to also work with professors and administrative staff, not only with students, in order to gain this change that we would want. And we also have the built environment professionals, because besides working with the future professionals, you also need to work with the current ones. We've organized different types of empathy exercises from individual level to very complex ones, like the empathy retreat, which is an intersectional research project. In one of them, for instance, we brought together 32 people of diverse social and professional categories. They were architects, urban planners, public administration, activists, but also expert citizens of diverse ages. The youngest was 2, the oldest was 67. And we brought these people together for 5 days in order to change the way they see disability from the medical model to seeing it more focused from this broader spectrum of human diversity and eventually turn accessibility into a priority. Then we also do one-day workshops with professionals, empathy workshops. These are activities that combine our professional experience related to historical facts, understanding biases, where they came from, the thousands of years of oppression that existed, but also with real life stories. And this is a very important part for us because this is where stories of people with permanent disabilities become more visible. Part of the working with built environment professionals is related to getting involved into events like biennales or annuals that are organized. This is from 2021 in the Architecture Biennale in Timișoara. And we were also involved in organizing an architecture annual related to inclusive cities. And this also brought us the opportunity to develop a brief for a competition, a design competition, that actually led to creating a requirement related to accessibility and inclusion in design competitions in Romania. So lessons related to built environment professionals, accessibility and inclusion still often perceived as special cases. Professionals who work in this area are sometimes, like me, for instance, people like me are sometimes seen as social workers, which is not a bad thing, but I'm seen like that rather than a designer, which is why practice and built examples are essential to be done in parallel, even though it's difficult. It's important to have them both to be able to influence the built environment professionals. Then workshops, design guidelines, and collaborations with professionals for sure help broaden understanding and build confidence. And as I said earlier, to improve the built environment, we first need to change professionals' mentalities. And these people need a space to practice actively listening, empathy, and engagement with human diversity, as was in the case of, that's why we do the empathy retreats. And something that we've noticed and we are trying to do, especially with the inclusive architecture course, is that it would be valuable to add a phase in the design phases of the project before the analysis of context, one focused on recognizing and questioning one's own biases. I'm close to the last two, public administration. Unfortunately, this is a really important stakeholder that I feel I have worked with less than the others. And this is mostly because I am discouraged by some political ways of working, and it's been, in a way, emotionally difficult to work with public administration. But we still do things with them. They are, as I said, they are a very important stakeholder that influences the way built environment is developed. So we participate and organize in public debates. We offer unpaid consultancy and guidance, and also empathy workshops for public administration. This is an image with our ex-city mayor, which is now the president of Romania. And it was a discussion about the accessibility of playgrounds, public playgrounds in Bucharest. There's also an image from an inclusive Bucharest debate we've organized, public debate, and one workshop or empathy workshop we have had with a public museum. So the lessons are related to the low awareness and limited technical knowledge and bureaucratic inertia that slow down the progress. That is always a problem, unfortunately, when it comes to public administration. Collaboration with municipalities help bridge gaps between policy and practice. That is for sure. And change is more effective when institutions are supported and not criticized. Although they make it very easy to get into being critical, but it's very important to find the balance between support and criticizing. So practical tools, guidance, and long-term partnerships are really important in this case. And sustainable impact really comes from building internal capacity. We've seen it a lot of times, even in Bucharest, when it comes to public administrations, that even when they want to create tenders related to public space projects, they do not have the professionals in-house that might know what to ask in those tenders related to accessibility and inclusion and the process that has to be set in place. The last one is international outreach. And some examples of international outreach are related to my involvement in URBAC Network, which is a European Union program, as an ad hoc expert. And the example I have put here is from an online webinar I held. And this is important because it connects me to public administrations in the European Union to help support getting the knowledge about the inclusive approach further, and also working with people to identify their biases related to disability and accessibility. And probably the most important international outreach I have had until now, which is this Fulbright experience that is really life-changing. And I'm really grateful for the whole MIT team, and also to Valerie and the whole IHCD team, as I said at the beginning, for this experience I'm having here. And the lessons related to international outreach and why this is important is that when you have internal experience which is limited, international connections become especially important, because learning from countries with longer histories in accessibility and inclusive design helps strengthen local practice. And international exchange can also support public administration in building that knowledge and capacity that I was talking about a slide before. And when I talk about international outreach, this is not just one way, because at the same time, Romania and other countries and their experiences might offer valuable lessons for other countries, because working in difficult contexts can generate insights that are relevant beyond the local setting that you have. So going back to the beginning, as I said, I thought I'm an architect, I'll do participatory design processes, and we will have good public spaces. But as you've seen, this is a systemic problem. So the simple plan turned into, okay, I am an architect, I need an inclusive team, I need to gain communities' trust, I need to work with built environment professionals, with public administration, with academia, with resources, with advocacy, and also develop examples and best practice examples. Because this is a whole system in place that needs to change. And this is how you get to having an inclusive process, and then eventually, hopefully, an inclusive society. And what's very interesting is that they are all interdependent. Unfortunately, you cannot work with just one of them if you want to have change in place. So I started as an architect, but along the way, I also became facilitator, advocate, educator, connector. And we have worked, not just myself, my whole team, we have worked on connecting people. We bring people with and without disabilities to share stories and learn from each other and build genuine relationships that actually help us break down biases. We educate, we teach independent life skills and train a new generations of guides and mobility trainers across the country, as I said earlier. And we also publish books and best practice examples on inclusive design in architecture and technology. We empathize, we help people, support people empathize because we create transformative experiences that shift how people see disability and accessibility. And what is more important is that we support them to take real, meaningful action afterwards. So I realized that architecture today is less about creating objects and spaces and more about enabling systems and facilitating change. And it really is my belief that the architect of the 21st century is a facilitator of systemic change and no longer just a creator. So to sum it up, from this whole experience, my key lessons are, first of all, related to measuring impact, which is slow and complex, but absolutely necessary, even when it is not budgeted. And I say this because this is the only way that you can see if you are on the right track. This is the way for you to confirm where you're going and if what you are doing is good, but it's also a way to get support from others. So we are trying to prioritize measuring impact after projects have ended as much as we can. Then working in difficult environments forces for sure a deeper understanding of how systems actually function, because you need to understand all the parts of the system that keep it in place and they are not letting it develop the right way. And change is possible even in fragile systems when foundations are built collectively. That is very important. There is still hope even in really fragile systems. And something that I think is a good reminder is what keeps me going. And I think it's important for everybody to be able to sustain their work through these moments, through identifying the moments where you see what you're doing matters, whether it is seeing somebody with visual disabilities that was dependent to their parents to go around the city and then be able to take the bus and go to a party or go meet some friends and make friends in the city, or seeing people on Mahmoudiya's waterfront. For instance, we've met somebody in a wheelchair, in an electrical wheelchair, that on the Danube shore there, and actually told us that they didn't believe that this project would be accessible. So these moments really make you go further. And why everything that I've said until now should matter to all of us, and to try to get out of maybe some of the echo chambers that we sometimes get into, why we need to take this message further and put all this effort into systemic work. This is because regardless of the categories we think we are into today, our abilities and needs change throughout our lives. And this topic includes all of us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now everybody knows why I was so excited to meet you. That was terrific.
I was really nervous.
So our tradition is that we invite our audience to be part of this conversation, and we're dead serious about that. So we will use the Q&A, though there may be questions already in chat. Let me just see. And we'll start with my old friend, Dr. Nat Hosono, who is coming to us from Tokyo, partly because it's very late in the night. It's actually early morning there. Nat is a member of the Japan Toilet Association to improve public toilets, particularly for disabled users. How about the accessibility situation of the public toilets in Romania? I bet that's an interesting story.
It is. It's such an important public facility, and it's one that it can make or break the decision of going out of the house for many people. So yeah, the situation with public toilets and restrooms are they don't even exist, restrooms, they're just public toilets. It's very bad in Romania. In many of the cities, I don't have one example where public toilets are okay in Romania. So we have a lot of work to do here. And as I said, there's a lot of work even to convince public administration that they need to prioritize this infrastructure and how important it really is. we would have a lot to learn from Japan related to public toilets. And it would be amazing if, for instance, we would be able to arrange an exchange between public administrations from Romania to Japan. So it's very bad, almost non-existent.
Thank you,
I mean,
Iris.
not just the ones which are not accessible. Public toilets in general are
In general,
very bad.
yeah. This is a question from Francisco in Lasta, and he is asking about, have you explored design strategies that are supportive of people with cognitive disabilities? If so, what specific design features have you considered? And you know that this is a big priority of IHCD and has been for a while. I want to do a shout out to our friends in England. They have a British standard on design for the mind. Francisco, if you have missed that IHCD webcast, the author of that standard was actually our presenter in December, and it's archived on our website. I highly recommend it. I will also say that Design for the Mind is available for free, which is seldom the truth of, that's seldom the reality for British standards, but this one is free. So if you don't have it, we can certainly send it along to you. And Iris, you know, you're beginning to deal with this issue in this year. Why don't you talk about your response to that? This idea of brains that work differently and that extraordinary spectrum. And if people aren't aware of it, in the United States, the spectrum of brain or cognitive-based issues is the #1 reason for disability among adults. It has been the #1 reason for disability among children and youth for decades. So tell us about your revelations about thinking about this.
Well, the strategy were for sure related, first of all, to how to get people with the diverse cognitive disabilities involved in the projects. This is a very important part because sometimes you need to also adapt the methodology that you use to involve people in the understanding of context to the developing of the design. So this was very important from personalizing the research methods, from, I don't know, working one-on-one with people, working only online with some people who are not comfortable to share with other people or be present in big groups. So that was for on the one side. And then when it comes to specific design features, they are very much related to the information that we get from the people that are involved in this project. And they focus a lot on acoustics and how sound exists and moves in the place. It's a bit more difficult in public spaces, in open public spaces, because that's my focus. I'm focused more on open public spaces. And that's why there we need to figure out how to have places that offer people, again, the freedom in use, for instance, to be able to not be as visible as, to have the choice to be or not visible, or to be part of a very crowded area or take a break somewhere, and have a space that offers multiple ways of taking a break and being out of many stimuli. Then there's also related to cognitive disabilities, the way you send the information, the wayfinding system is very important. So this is, again, a very important part of the colors we use, the materials, the textures that we use in wayfinding, the type of fonts, everything that gets into this that might also support cognitive disabilities.
Thank you, Iris. Ben Schultz is asking, you talked a lot about empathy exercises. What do those exercises look like with the design team?
With the design team, they first of all started with trying to understand the concepts and seeing where everybody was when it comes to what they understand, what disabilities, what accessibilities, as I said earlier. So it starts from this, understanding who we are working with and how they see these concepts. And then based on the level of understanding and the way they see these concepts, we then personalize the type of exercises that we have to do with the people. So it can go from starting from history related to disability exclusion, especially related to the built environment. It can also be more, it is for sure combined with putting people together with people who are outside of their social bubble and just socializing, because that leads to understanding the stories of exclusion. So they are very diverse based on the experience of the particular team.
Thank you. Our next one I'd like you to take is actually from Rachel Updegrove, and this is sort of a perfect marriage of the question before, great present, also share her compliments. Great presentation, Iris. Your honesty and empathy was a well embedded throughout your presentation. I am an autistic woman and designer. Excuse me, has been struggling with the design world desire for a checklist to solve these complex inclusive design problems. Thank you, Rachel. What are your thoughts on this? How can we make guidelines less about checking a box and more about human experience and empathy? You want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, this is this is a huge this is a huge problem. I mean, I'm also dealing with this. Valerie is also dealing with this, and the whole IHCD team are dealing with this problem of this tendency of going directly to having a checkbox, people asking for quick solutions. What do I do to increase the accessibility level of my space? And it's very difficult to make them see that the whole process is important, not just the end result. So the only thing that I found working until now is this creating these settings where people with and without disabilities, whether it's permanent, temporary, contextual, can get together and interact, because this is the most important part, getting to know people who are different from you, who have different needs, and seeing them interact with the environment. That's why we focus a lot, as I said, on empowering people with disabilities to become more visible, but at the same time organizing these empathy experiences that can shift the way people see disability. In my mind, biases related to disability are the root cause of the problems that we have today. And this is something that we need to focus on. How can we change perception, at least from my point of view, how can we change perception on disability to start seeing it from the broader spectrum of human diversity?
And Rachel, I'm going to actually step in here for a second and talk to you about IHCD's method. We use a variation of contextual inquiry. We've been doing it for a very long time. And we engage people who we have dubbed with the name user experts, user with a capital U and a / and a capital E. These are people with lived experience of a functional limitation across the spectrum of physical, sensory, and or brain-based conditions, and really see them as critical to the design process. And part of what we're doing is engaging people in real environments. So these are real people with real personal experiences in real environments, and doing what anybody else would do in that environment, only they are recording what's working, what's not working, and what they think would work better. That collaborative, participatory process generates a quality of insight that, I got to tell you, for people who've done it dozens, if not hundreds of times, it never fails us to deliver insight. It never fails to show us something that we didn't think about, because that unique experience sees the context in a new way. It's just really critically important. We just did a big national webcast the other day with the Society of Environmental Graphics Designers about this, specific to museum exhibits. That's one of the areas that we work in. But again, I can't overstate how significant it is to have real people in your environment. This is not theoretical. This is not about a checklist. And I think especially for the complexity of the way in which disability is experienced today, it is not simple. The world is complex, and the experience of a functional limitation is complex, and we really need to learn from the lived experience. So just want to give that an affirmation of how critical that is. This is a really interesting question from Joan Mahone. Are you working with elementary school age children to create understanding of people with disabilities, and how are you communicating with the deaf? So start with the children and then to the deaf. But Iris, I hope you can talk about your playground work.
Yeah. We have been working with elementary school age children. On the one side, as you mentioned already, the playground work that we design, the work that we do to get them involved into our design processes, to understand their needs, their preferences related to the age range, disabilities, genders, and so on. So this is on the one side how we work. how we involve kids from elementary school and also their parents who might be with and without disabilities, both the kids and the parents. And on the other side, we also work directly with empathy workshops in elementary schools. We have managed to finally convince private organizations when they reach out to us for services related to empathy workshops, we get them to we pay half the empathy workshops and they pay the other half, so we can organize them for free for schools. So we also do these empathy exercises in schools which would not have the budget for this. And when it comes to how we are communicating with deaf people, we usually use, we have an interpreter that comes to our events. We have them in empathy retreats. So this is the way we communicate. And now one of my colleagues has also started to learn Romanian Sign Language so that we would have somebody on our team that can communicate in sign language.
Thank you, Iris. Let me just see what else we have here. Here's a challenging one from an anonymous attendee. How much did your riverfront project cost? And what are the costs for maintenance that the community cannot support? Is the community able to find the financial resources to maintain the project at all?
Mm-hmm. I have to get back to you on how much it costs to maintain it for them. But these are also data that we are trying to gather in these 5 years of analysis that we are doing. If they are trying to do something to raise more money to have it, unfortunately, right now it doesn't seem a priority for them to do that. They have some lawsuits with some private owners, and I don't think they are focused that much on unfortunately, on maintaining the waterfront, which is very sad for us. And we are trying to support them as much as possible and remind them how important it is for the community. This is part of why we do the analysis, to show them that it's important to invest in public spaces and have this inclusive process. So yeah, unfortunately, related to that, there are no ways that they are trying to raise their budget to invest in the maintenance.
How do you go about, this is from Claire Norhausen, how do you go about getting developer buy-in? That's one of the challenges that we love to tackle, developers. How do you get their buy-in?
Maybe I would need to clarify what do you mean by developer buy-in? Maybe I'm not...
Yes, developers, this may be from another part of the world. It is one of the challenges that we face here in the United States, that developers are often the people with the significant resources to create public spaces and private spaces, often a combination of public and private spaces. They tend to be people with a lot of resources, a lot of connections, and they are the ones that government depends upon to actually make design happen. Does that help?
So it's related to POPs, to the development to the development of privately owned public spaces?
It is partly privately owned public spaces, but it is also the development of any major project is going to likely involve a developer who is going to be the person who oversees the whole thing and funds a good part of it.
Well, I think the questions that I've asked answer the fact that it is not happening in Romania. So unfortunately, we do not get the developers to do that. They do have privately owned public spaces. The concept is not called like that in Romania. And unfortunately, public administration doesn't have a strategy in place to use, for instance, how it's happening in New York. The more public space you create, you can make buildings taller and have more space to rent afterwards. We don't have these types of facilities, so it's very difficult to convince developers because they have no incentives and they can develop either way. So this is something that we were not able to work a lot on, but we have them on our list of stakeholders. I'm sorry that I don't have an answer for this.
None of us have an answer for this. I do want to note that we have an attendee from Vietnam who is saying basically, thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation. I'm sure there are lots of challenges in the environments in Vietnam also.
Thank you for being here and listening to the presentation.
And Iris has defined AMAIS, which stands for Alternative Methods of Social, I've just lost it. You say it,
The
of social
Alternative Methods
integration.
Association. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's a nonprofit. I realize I haven't said, maybe I said it that would be the plan to start a nonprofit, but then I didn't say that AMAIS is a nonprofit.
Uh, and and
And the acronym is in Romanian. That's why it's not the same in English.
okay. And here's a colleague from New Hampshire, a colleague who is a longtime friend and respected architect, Todd Hansen. Too often developers focus on return on investment. It's shown in economic benefit. If they are shown an economic benefit, they get it. And I think he's responding to that question about developers. It's the ROI of inclusive design. Thank you, Todd. Great to hear from you. And see what else we've got here. And actually, there's a link. Jaquel Reynolds, one of our colleagues who wrote the brilliant book behind me here, The Inclusive Housing Design Guide, just generously put up Design for the Mind and the link for that in chat. So please take a peek at that. Actually, there's a person who's asking a simple question that I think you have a ready answer to, which how did you choose to start with the blind?
Oh, it was serendipity. Maybe also my name. A lot of things connect me back. And my name Iris because it's the colored part of the eye. So just serendipity. This is why I started, and it was very convincing. The fact that we were also very much pushed by everybody in architecture school to focus on the visual aspects, and this was something that I was very uncomfortable with. There was always such a pressure to have great renderings, great models. And as I said, we didn't discuss much about the relationship to other senses. So this for sure pushed me after the serendipitous event to start like that.
There's a question again from a longtime colleague, Janice Mirabassi. It may be helpful, certainly here in the United States, to contact local disability commissions where they exist to help advocate with local developers. And it'd be good to teach commissions how to do that. We actually have a training that we don't teach often enough and probably have to put it into a simple package people can download, teaching people who are not designers to read plans. It's a really valuable skill because sometimes you're looking at the existing environment and sometimes you're trying to figure out what are they going to design or what are they going to build. So thank you, Janice. That's a really good advice. And here in Massachusetts, we have an extraordinarily abundant and rich set of hundreds of disability commissions. It's quite an extraordinary resource here. So they are really valuable to the development efforts in local towns.
That's true. And there were some attempts in Bucharest to start disability commissions. Unfortunately, because of the biases that I mentioned earlier and the lack of information and knowledge, first of all, they were optional. They didn't have actual power of influencing. So that doesn't really help if it's something that's optional. And then on the other side, we have had problems with the professional side, because lived experience is extremely important. You need it. But the commissions that they have tried to start were just based on lived experience. It didn't matter if the people who were on the commission would be trained. I mean, they didn't want to invest in training people to have a professional view on accessibility. And sometimes this can, if there is no professional experience, unfortunately, it can lead to other solutions that might create obstacles for people who have other types of lived experiences. So these were the two challenges that we have faced with disability commissions in Bucharest.
A comment about the developers. Those who have worked with developers know that this is a big target. Our longtime colleague and wonderful leader from Ireland, Finola Rogerson, comment that developers also love to be awarded. Gosh, that is one of the big drivers of developer behavior, not to be forgotten. So your Danube project of a public space was given an award. So you should tout that to the people responsible for development in Romania.
Yeah, we have sent them.
One of our other guests, Emma Marlin Curiel, is asking, do you have any personal connection to this work?
Oh, right now, yes. After more than a decade, I have a lot of personal connections from friends to family members who went from temporarily able-bodied to permanent disabilities. So yes, after more than a decade, I have a lot of personal connections. But when I started, I did not have, no.
Thank you. Here's a question from, again, a friend and also a board member. That's Dr. Erin Friedlander. What outcomes do you hope to measure as successful impact?
When it comes to impact measurement, we first of all have two outcomes that we look at. One of them is increasing the active quality life of people with permanent disabilities. And on the other side, we have compassionate empathy, which is related to people who have changed their perception on disability and then also act in a certain way that supports the change that we want to have. So these are the two outcomes, and how we measure this to see that we reach our success that we envision. For the active quality life, we have on the one side kilometers and hours spent between people with and without disabilities in public spaces. This is something that we look at. So we would see how much the visibility increases. Then we also have the level of independence of people with disabilities. They are evaluated before coming to our independent life skill school and then seeing after 6 or 12 months what changes. And this looks at using technology, using, for instance, white canes, how much they go around the city by themselves. And then when it comes to the empathic actions, the compassionate empathy side, this is where we measure, first of all, how people define disability before and after getting involved in our projects. Also, the feelings related to disability. What does one person feel when they find out somebody has a permanent disability? For instance, until now, close to 70% of the respondents, regardless if they have or not disabilities, they associate disability with negative feelings like pity, sadness, anger. And then we measure this, and the success is related to the fact if they change and start to associate it with positive feelings, like empathy, joy, things that are more positive. So as a definition, feelings, and then the empathic actions that they take. And we have defined what empathic action means to us, and there are different levels from interacting and going to certain activities together to convincing your firm to make their office space more accessible. So they are of different complexities, and this is what we measure to see that we are getting to our success that we envision. And our success is related to having a critical mass of people that we consider allies, and allies are people with and without disabilities that define disability more from the social model rather than the medical model, who associate disability with positive feelings and who make empathic actions. So these are the allies.
There's an interesting question from, again, a wonderful colleague, an architect in the Netherlands, Severin Kaas. Thank you for your wonderful presentation, Iris, very recognizable. You rightly talk about a systemic change and the different roles of the architect. In the Netherlands, I'm working on this as well, but I noticed that all links in the construction sector need to move along. For example, manufacturers of intercom systems as well. Do you have good examples of that? And I think she's so right that in many cases, it's really bringing along that the manufacturer is another part of the interdependent network. And one, I actually just shared something yesterday with a project that was about a tricky thing. It's the right hardware for sliding doors, accessible, fully usable hardware for sliding doors. Hard to find, originally designed in New Zealand, now available worldwide. But it is getting people to recognize, how important that intersection with product can become. Thank you, Severin, very much. Any thoughts
Oh,
on that, Iris? Have you had a chance to actually deal with the manufacturing sector at all?
mhm. Most of our connections to manufacturing sectors are more related to tech companies than to people that design companies that design physical products like intercoms, or because there is not much production going on in Romania related to that. So that's why we haven't had the chance to do that there. But what we do is actually work with tech companies, and we take them through these empathy exercises. They come to our activities, and then we also support them with developing better software and apps, which would be related to increasing accessibility of products. The only thing is that we are working on digital products more rather than physical. But as I said,
I,
because
I,
there are not many manufacturers.
I do want to give acknowledgement to a phenomenon that now is 25 years old, which is the work being done in Japan by multinational corporations who are people who still make three-dimensional things. And the commitment there has been remarkable. And that in some cases, I'm fortunate to be on the jury for an annual awards program that Iris had mentioned before. But many of the companies that participate are constantly working to create solutions that are inclusive, that are products in enormous multinational companies. So we lately have been using and promoting some free open source solutions from Panasonic and from Sony as examples of people who are really committed and also committed to kind of raising the bar by giving their intellectual property away.
And I've also seen somebody mention that the intra and interdisability biases are a barrier even
Why
in
don't you
their
run with
context.
that one? That is Shanine. Yes,
Mhm.
why don't you grab that?
Oh, I totally agree. As I said, even I think she was building on on what I said about the lived experience, that sometimes it's not enough, even though it's extremely important. And yeah, we've also had experiences like this with, for instance, there's an example of a white male with visual disabilities and also diabetes that would advise against looking at accessibility obstacles for people of LGBTQIA spectrum. So yeah, we have seen we have seen examples where the fact that people do not have a professional training when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, unfortunately, can increase the existing biases and also the obstacles, whether they are built environment obstacles or attitudinal obstacles, unfortunately.
Thank you. Always important to get the opportunity to introduce the attitudinal obstacle.
Yeah, they are a really big barrier.
They're really the biggest barrier. Yes. This is something that a number of people have asked in a number of different ways, but I'm gonna use Pete Connor's query here. Iris, would you speak further about the architect's role today, extending beyond creating spaces to enabling systems of change? And
Mhm.
since that's so central to your presentation, we can maybe let this be the last question.
Yeah, this has been something that has been on my mind for a long time, even since I was not related to having the answer, this belief that I have now, but even during architecture school, I have felt that the architecture world does not have yet an identity related to the 21st century. We are still forming it, but it does feel, and I think we can see this in events around the world, and shout out to Fionnuala, who is here as well, because she's in the UIA, we can still see that architectural events, unfortunately, bring people from the architecture environment, and they are not very well connected to the rest of the professions, which is a problem. And I feel that this connection is related to the fact that we have still, as a profession, stayed in this idea that we are creators and that people need our support to have their to even in some occasions in air quotation to save them from their situations. And there is this relationship, a power relationship which I think in the 21st century is no longer valid as it was maybe in the Renaissance period when architects were really important. So this is why I feel that we need to, as architects, to regain the connection to the real needs of the community, and start to become more facilitators rather than creators, giving people who are not professionally trained as architects the power to shape the built environment. Not that we control the power, because this is another thing. I feel like architects are no longer as relevant at all in this whole process. It's more about developers or public administration, especially in Romania, but I've also seen it in other contexts. Architects no longer have this power of this decision. And the star architecture era is also ending, fortunately. So yeah, this is why I feel that if we need to regain our relevance in society, we need to start defining our personality as a profession in the 21st century. And my belief is that it's towards facilitating systemic change, not creators of the built environment.
And if I might just interject a favorite quote from our old friend Ray Lifshay, who we lost a couple of years ago, professor of architecture at Cal. Architecture is a social art. Don't forget.
That's true. Words to live by.
And we will let you go. I do want to say that we have Iris's book in Romanian, which of course means its audience is limited. We've had a sort of specialization over time of taking brilliant books written by colleagues we respect greatly and translating those into English. And Iris and I are talking about that. So we're hoping that perhaps her book can be more available by being in English. So we're going to keep making that plan. And remember, the coolest parties in Bucharest are at AMAIS.
Yes,
Thank
we are
you.
waiting for you at our community center. So you can find us at amais.com, .pro, sorry.
Thank you, Iris. We are all in your debt.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for everybody who stayed with us until now.